Well, Monday morning and about 10 o'clock in this time zone anyway. And it's time for relaxing painting with Dice and Dungeons. There's going to be very little painting today. And that in both senses of the word little. One is that there's not going to be very much of it in terms of how many pieces are going to get painted. And the other is that the piece that is going to get painted is very, very little. And so there will be little painting. There will be a little painting today. And that's as clever as anything is going to get, I think. Because, I don't know. To think of things to talk about today. I'm just running out of stuff. Without having to repeat. After doing this for a couple of years now, really, it's kind of like, what can I reminisce about? What can I complain about? What can I talk about that used to be a thing and isn't anymore? I've used up like television, 50s and 60s television. I've used up technologies that disappeared. I've used up nuclear holocaust, which I talked about when I was building the submarine, because that was the purpose of the submarine, not the model, but the real submarine in which the model is based, was to deliver at least 16 warheads and blow things up, and back and forth kind of thing. So I don't know. Maybe I'll just talk about what I'm doing, I guess, and we'll see if anything comes to mind. What will happen today is I'm going to attempt to do more painting actually, on the control panel of the Savoia S.21 Porco Rosso's plate. And there are two options. One is the cheater option, which is a decal on a flat surface, okay, which is that brown bit down there, the darker brown one, okay. That's just a flat surface, and a decal is applied to that, and then it looks like a decal of an instrument panel. And the other one that I put on here, and it's still here, that's good, is has embossed dials and buttons on it. And those are going to be painted. I'm going to paint the dials white. I'm going to paint the bezels or the rims of the dials brass, because, that's how it would look. The buttons, I don't know, black or red maybe. The tricky part is that inside the dials, there's some additional detail of like pointers and what might have been numbers, but indicators, hash marks and stuff. And I'm not sure how I'm going to get that done. I should be able to get the inside of the dials painted white without too much trouble. And if I go over the edges a little bit, that's not a problem, because then when I paint the rims brass, hopefully doing that without getting it on everything else, we'll see how that goes. And I'll just have to decide what to try to do, what I might try to do in terms of the insides of the dials. The one that's on the box top, made by apparently some sort of super duper, anyway, you can see here, there, the instrument panel there. I don't know how well you can see it, but you can see the dials are painted white, and they actually were able to somehow get some of the interior detail painted too. But that's the bit I'm working on, just that little bit, this little bit of thing That's why there's going to be a little painting. I'm probably going, I haven't done decals in 20 years. Okay. When I was making models as a kid, did a lot of airplanes. And so they always had decals that said United States of America and had the star in a circle with little red and white bars on it, little wings, how those were. So that was always the last thing, is slap it all together, glue it up. Maybe it would take 2 days because some of the cement would sit overnight with some rubber bands around it, like on the fuselage and the wings. But as soon as the parts were on there and they weren't falling off, we'd put the decals on. And they usually went more or less where they were supposed to. The thing about the decals, though, is that the painted part, and that's my understanding, is that the decal is pretty much just a film of paint. I'm not sure how that works, but it does. And it's possible you can make your own with decal paint on a surface that is like the underlayment of decals. But that digression aside, decals, the decal transparent material extends beyond the printed part, and when they're applied, that shows. It's supposed to look like it's painted on, but if you can see all this cellophane, basically the cellophane look around what's supposed to be painted on, then it looks like it's just a decal that's stuck on. So the last time I did this, which is something like 20 years ago, I very, very carefully trimmed the decal right up to the edge of the painted part so that there wasn't any decal extending beyond the color, the part that had color. And it ended up looking pretty good. I still have that model. It's way over there. It's anyway, yeah, it went. Oh, I said anyway again. We should turn that into I don't know what the audience is like. They would say here a drinking game. Every time I would say that word, you do that. But this is a G-rated stream. It's beyond even PG-13 usually. Yeah, but decals. So trim the decals right down to the painted part, and that's what I'm going to do. It's a pretty tiny one. You can see it's not a very big part. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it will go all right. And then I'll be able to apply it and use a little bit of a paper towel like this, tiny little bit, to soak up the liquid and press it down into place. The other thing I would like to try, I'm going to try to do today, is it says here, the year in review is not just show you what is going on with Porco Rosso, which is this here. Okay. These parts here surround the cockpit. The instrument panel goes right on there, the face of that. But these form like a cage around the cockpit here. And this part attaches right in front of the fuel tank. And it was attached, and then now it's not attached. And at some point I'll stick it back on so that it's, attached. But I can't build this cage before the instrument panel is done, because if I do, then I can't get the instrument panel on it. I mean, it might be sort of possible to slip it in and twist it around somehow, but I can tell you it's a whole lot easier to just push it onto the surface there and then build around it than it would be to try to get it into this cage. This is what it looks like in the schematic form, and the instrument panel is there. No, I'll take that back. It isn't even possible to do that, because this part, the side part's actually attached to the instrument panel. So if the instrument panel isn't attached, it can't do the rest. That's why these are sitting here. not being assembled is because they're waiting for the instrument panel to be done, which I have been putting off and, kind of avoiding because I don't want to mess it up. So, yeah, if I can get the instrument panel done adequately, and it will take a lot of time, even though it's really tiny and the little bits are tiny. I'm going to be working very slowly with in a teeny little brush, trying to get the paints in the right places and not slopping it all over. And then after I do slop it all over anyway, going back with a tiny brush, touching up the colors. So there's that. So far, it's been going really well. And if I can get the instrument panel done, then I can move on to the next parts, which are the engine. And that all comes together with the engine inside of a housing that is eventually set on top of the plane. This particular plane, there's a picture of it on the front. There is on the box. I could just show you the box. But I can start finding these pieces and then starting to clean them up. So that will involve no painting. It will involve sawing, filing, and sanding. And as I've discovered, probably for this particular model, about half of the time that's spent working on the model is sawing, filing, and sanding. And then maybe 5% is actually cementing stuff together. Assembly is hardly any of the time. And then the balance, if I did my arithmetic right, is 45% is painting. Hi, Who. I haven't seen you here in ages, and I haven't done a flip that long either. Yeah, I'm going to flip this thing. Okay, this was I have different colors of white. They're slightly different colors, different consistencies. And I was testing them to see which one do I want to put on the instrument panel. And there's a balance between coverage and thickness when it's dry. And coverage is important, like this one, which is this, covers much better than those. You can see that here. I know everybody's traveling all the time. Then this week it's my turn. That's why I'm going to be gone Wednesday, Friday, and next Monday. I won't be streaming Wednesday, Friday, and next Monday because I'm traveling. I'm liking traveling less as I get older. It's mainly it's airports. I could do that. I could go on, and who could join in, right? About complaining about airports. That could be my rant today. Well, going back to the balance. So this one covers the best because you can see it's much whiter than these, which is really thin. But when I tested it on these raised parts, which are similar to the raised parts of the instrument panel, it's so thick it covers them up. And so it's between these two, and I'm going to use this one. They're almost identical in terms of coverage and allowing the detail to show through. But this one's a little newer. This is older paint, and I think this will work better. That's just a thought. So I'm going to, having made a decision, get the stuff I'm not using out of the way. And I'm going to then do a flip for Who. And I'm going to flip this thing. Why not? It's right here. Move the camera up. My highly sophisticated zoom. This is my zoom function. Is yeah. I get the I get the best studio stuff here. Okay, let's do this. There's 1, 2, 3. Almost fell. That time it did. That was inevitable, meaning that definitely had to happen. There wasn't any choice about it. 4, 2 of each. 5, 6. And there was 3 this side and 3 that side. Huh. Yep. Random works. Okay. So the little bit of little painting that I'm going to be doing is on the instrument panel. I'm going to start by putting the white on the inside of the dials, and then seeing if there's any way I can get the detail on the inside of them, if there's any way I can do that at all. And I'll either succeed or fail. And if I succeed, then I'll be painting the rims, the edges of the instrument panel dials, and then I have to wash very, very carefully, put smoky ink wash onto the parts that are not dials, okay? Because the paint that's on there right now is very different color than it is once it's washed with that. And then, depending on how things go, if I feel like I'm not dropping stuff, I would like to show people what I have actually done this year. Because I finished the submarine, which is way back there under some paper towels, trying not to get dusty. And I think I might get really brave and just pick it up and open it up and show people the inside of the submarine, just to show that I did it. And then the Apollo stack is mostly done, and I can show off the different components of that. They are in boxes over there, also trying not to get dusty. Yeah, I think I can do that. So while I'm doing that, what I'll be doing is I'll be getting up. There's no place here I can put them all, so I have to get up and pick up like one at a time and show it to you, and then put it back. Do that. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm back on track. I haven't used up more than 10 minutes of a stream talking about things and not doing things in quite a while. And today I managed to use up almost 20 minutes. Well, can't finish unless you get started. And this thing I flipped, by the way, is a stand for the Porco Rosso minifig. And someday, maybe, I don't know when, someday I'll start painting the minifig. There's 2 of them, really. I should talk about it. There's the standing up one that goes on the stand that just is a display minifig, and the other one is actually designed to sit in the cockpit. And that one, before this piece is attached to this, because it covers up the cockpit area. Once this is assembled, I'm going to test it to see if I can get the Porco Rosso figure through this opening on the top. And if I can, then I'll fully assemble this and set it aside, and then put the Porco Rosso figure into the seat later. But if I can't, then assembly will be further delayed, waiting for the sitting Porco Rosso. The sitting Porco Rosso is in 2 parts. His head here. His head is separate. I don't know. Well, I guess I can see that, the injection molding, just because it's like this, you can't see it. can you? No. Because of the way the head projects, I guess it couldn't be clearly ejected, molded as one piece. Someday I'll put his head on. And there's a lot of cleaning up on this. It's got all sorts of mold seams and little bits and pieces of plastic that shouldn't be there. Anyway, I'm going to be doing some painting here. I said, anyway, again, that's twice today. Be working on this, and then I'm going to paint the dials white to see how that goes. And then I think I'll do the decal. And just to get it done, it has to get done at some point. And depending on, there were some people on Friday who were interested in the Apollo model. And if they come back today, then that's when I'll show off the parts, the 90% completion of the Apollo, and I'll show the two parts that aren't done yet and explain why not. Yeah. Okay, these come off, and head magnifiers go on because I really need them to be able to see stuff. And I think because I'm painting white onto brown, that if I keep this on camera, it's always a big if I can keep this on camera, put this paper towel here, kind of where if I keep it on the paper towel, it'll be on camera, unless I move something. Okay, it's just going to be diagonal a little bit. It's how the camera's behaving today. I charged it up. It's got some supplemental lighting. Two little LEDs up here on the front, which actually make a difference. They really help. Focus, put some light right on the thing that's getting painted. Some white paint in the palette. About how today goes. If this goes badly, and there's always a chance that it could, if this goes badly, then I'm going to try the decal, and then maybe just start getting the next parts out. Getting this a little bit onto the rim. I wonder why. I wanted to get it up to, but not over the top of the rim. Painting the rim is going to be a challenge, it looks like. Now I'm going to try one of the tiny ones. I have to admire the master modelers who are able just, they have eyesight and steady hand that I can't replicate. You know, I mean, they just do some things that I can only imagine doing, but can't actually pull off in terms of getting straight lines and detail. Got like a tiny little piece of lint maybe on the tip of the brush, and that's actually enough to get paint where I don't want. There's little white dots there. Kind of what I'm trying to do is little white dots. Well, this one's really little. If I get a little bit of this white paint, which I am doing, onto the rim, I'm not too concerned about that because the rim will be painted a different color. I don't want it to get onto the what will become wood colored on the outside of the rim. Make sure to get the paint up to the rim. If not, yeah, apparent. Yeah, I've said before that it's like walking and chewing gum at the same time is doing this kind of painting and talking at the same time is just, I can't. I have to just like completely focus on this. So when I go silent, it's just a sign that this I have to really pay attention because for me this is challenging. I was coloring it white, and it it's thin enough. It's white enough that it really shows nicely, and it's thin enough that it hasn't covered any of the detail of the dials. So that gives me a chance to be able to paint the detail on the inside of the dials. This is another decision point for me as I'm doing this. It has to do with what happens in what order. Painting the rims of these, I can see now, is just going to be more difficult than I thought it would be. They're raised up. Okay. So I want to get the paint just on the rim. But if the paint doesn't behave or the brush slips a little bit, it's going to get onto the white part of the dial that I just painted white. And if I paint the detail on the inside, if I'm successful at that, okay, if I were somehow to be successful at doing that, it would mess it up. Sure. I really want to paint them brass. I could use the flattened nail head and try to emboss, stamp the color onto the rim. I could try to do that, but it would have to be black. And there's little buttons and things. I think there's a switch up here. I think they'll be red and black. There isn't really any good color chart thing. Okay, well, you can see there's circles there now, and they're not perfect circles because sometimes the paint got up on the rim a little bit. But they're pretty okay. Haven't messed it up. In some way, this brush is almost totally worn out. I'd say probably at least half the bristles have disappeared. So there's like 3 bristles left, which is good because it's just that fine a detail. So the technique, this over here, cap up what's left of this brush. So the technique I used on the submarine dials, and some of them came out to look pretty good. They really did look okay, is that I took a nail like this and I flattened the head of it, just filed it and sanded it so that it was very flat. Okay. This one came out really pretty well. And then I could ink this and stamp it. Okay. And because this is, metal, it doesn't bend or anything. And if it's lightly inked, and I stamped it straight down onto the surface, the raised parts, which would be the rim and the little dial bits on the inside, the pointer and the numbers, those pieces would get inked on. And this worked okay. The problem with this is that, look at the sizes. It's just too big. And this would work for the rim because the rim is raised up pretty high, but the little stuff on the inside is not raised very high. It's less than the rim. So if I stamped it, I would stamp the rim, but none of the innards. So I've got a small pin with a small pin head, and I'm going to see. It's rounded. If I ink that and I touched it, right in the bezel. It'll get ink on the rim, but it should also get ink on the detail inside. I think I'm going to try this. If it works, it'll look okay. If it doesn't, then I'm going to have to try to clean the ink off and maybe repaint some of it. The downside of this is that the ink dissolves in the paint. So if I get it on the rim of these dials, they're going to, paint's going to dissolve. So, there's another thing I can do. I'm going to try it on one of these. What is brown underneath, okay, is maybe I can scrape the paint off of the raised portions, and then it won't be black. Okay, the raised portions won't be black, but they'll be brown. At least they'll be darker. This looks okay. Kind of the upside of this is that I can always put white paint back on it again. They're not bad. I need to do a little white touch up on this. So if I can get You can't see what I'm doing. So this technique is it's kind of working. I'm not going to mess with it anymore. I think that, I mean, look, if you look at it, you can see, yeah, I mean, it exposed some of the dials and markings on there. And I think it did it enough. I could leave it alone. I'm going to let that dry for a bit and I'm going to find the paint I want to use for the rims, and hopefully I'll be able to do that like one infinitesimally tiny little dot at a time. And I'm going to be painting it in such a way that if the paint slops somewhere, you know, technical term for like gloops, that it's on the outside, and I can repaint it this kind of brownish color, because I don't want to get it on the white. That'll be hard to cover up. I'll have to scrape it off and start over. Let's see. There it is. I want my color chart. Looking for my brass colors. Where I got the silvers. Okay. So these are them. There's brass. There's bright brass. Bright brass would be way too bright. Copper. It's tempting to paint them copper. Ooh, but that wouldn't be an instrument panel. It would be brass on wood. The only question, and gold is way too bright, so it's regular brass. But the other color I might use is bronze, which is a darker. Where's my color patch? I should redo this sometime. And copper would look pretty cool, but it's not what not the right look. I don't think I don't have a spot for the bronze. That's interesting. The bronze is just darker. It's a really rich color. But I'm thinking that this plane would have fairly bright brass around the dials, even though the sun would catch it and it would be distracting to the pilot. just thinking that through. Bright brass and bronze. So, yeah, where's the one I want? Yes, that's brass. the uh, the label more off. Okay. Well, once again, it's can't finish unless it gets started. So this is yet another opportunity to mess this up. So far, it is not messed up yet. I'd really like to do the stamping method on this, but I can't trust it with the paint. The paint will be too thick on the nail head. If I ink it, that's one thing, but the paint would just ooze in onto the dial. Would it take a half hour to paint these little white dots? Pretty much. Even though I use that vibrator thing, I like to do this. Sometimes this is the only thing that really works. With some of the greens and blues, a little handshaking is necessary. Shaking. Sorry. Sometimes those things just come out. Just say these things and you go, why did I say that? Why not? All right. There's brass paint there. Brush pretty much horizontal and trying to touch. Yeah, I got it onto where the wood is. That's probably okay because that will be a relatively easy touch up compared to this. And I'm using these infinitesimally tiny little bits of paint. They dry on the brush really fast. Yeah, getting all over where the wood is. glad I'm doing this in this order because I'm getting a lot of brass paint on what will become the wood panel. But as long as I successfully cover that, recover it, tip of the brush is bent, so I was getting paint. As I was touching it with the tip, I was actually painting the brown surface, the bent part of the brush. Bad blob. Too much paint on the brush. And it got onto the bezel, onto the dial. I have to try to get some white paint back on that. This isn't going very well. At this, I was pretty sure that this would actually be the easiest part of painting it because the, the rim of the dials are raised up pretty high. But as it turns out, it's not easy, and I do have a mess. Isn't really a good thing to do, but that blob of paint is really going to be a problem. See what I can do about that in a bit. Or any other way that would have been able to do this. I don't understand why getting so much paint on the place where I don't want it. I mean, the whole instrument panel is practically brass now. I've gotten at least half of this paint has gone where I don't want it. Yeah, it'd be good if there was music playing, something dramatic. Something dramatic and tragic. Yeah, sorry for going so silent. Yeah, sometimes things are like that. It's just not going that well. Fix these little whites. Some spots need to have white paint put back on them. That'll be a little bit challenging because I want it to go on thin. So I want infinitesimal spots of white. It has to cover the metal, but not blank out everything else. We can get this tiny dot of brass paint, this spot, Okay. Need to do a lot of touch up. That looks it looks kind of okay, except I got brass paint all over where the brown goes. I'm going to paint the little buttons and dials first before I touch up the brown. I'm going to paint a couple of them black and a couple of them red. I want the glossy black. Okay. There's some buttons here. There's a little bit of a toggle switch up here. Toggle here. This is going to be red. Some buttons here. So the simplest thing is to paint these buttons black. Whatever they are. Messy. So these came out okay. One of the ones on the other side is messy. It's hard to tell where the tip of the brush is sometimes. Paint ran. Yeah, the brown touching up is going to be not a trivial thing. They're raised up from the surface, so if you look down on them, I want them to show. I don't want them to be unpainted. Do need to get some red. To get the red out. Yeah, and then I'm gonna let this dry. before I start with the brown again. Glossy red. That's like I think that's like an emergency switch or something. So it's got to be glossy red. Yeah, it's so tiny. I bet you probably can't see it at all. I'll show it to you after I get the red paint on it. Stuck my finger in the paint. That would have been interesting. Then it's a little bit below the instrument panel. Famous painter who made the incredibly detailed paintings. I guess several of them, worked with a brush with a single bristle. This is really close to that. There's another thing on here. Looked like there was up here, but now I'm not seeing it. That. Yeah, other than the mess I made with the black and the brass paint all over where the brown is, which now has to be rebrowned, it's not too bad. And I hopefully can very, very carefully rebrown the parts that need to be rebrowned without getting them onto the black and the red and the brass, because I don't want to have to come back again. And then once that's done, I want to put that wash on it to darken the wood color. Yeah, one more go around of potential problem. It's just not right. There's too much on a couple of spots and not enough on others. just leave it alone. I want that paint to be really quite dry before I start messing around with the brown paint again. Actually, it's desert yellow, I think. It's not really brown, it's desert yellow. But I don't want, especially the black, I don't want these other colors to get into it. So this is just going to have to set aside. Cap up this brush, what's left of it here. There's the other instrument panel, which is decal. I'll just pull that out. This is the back. The back has little prongs on it that go into some holes in the instrument panel thing. And then the flat side is where the decal goes. And you just show you the contrast. See how nice this looks? It's like all mahogany kind of thing, as opposed to this color, the brown undercoat. But I have to coat that and then do the wash on it, and it'll, it's just going to take a while. But I want this to look like that rich mahogany color. An instrument panel with brass dials should be mahogany. Is that one not right? I think it's okay. In this box is the rest of the model. Okay. There's the engine parts. Many of these will be coming out next because they're these things. And some of it is red. It's molded in red, but it just looks like plastic, so it's going to be overpainted. Not in the sense of painted too much, but painted over. Oh yeah, there's the decals. Decals here. And this one here is the instrument panel. To get that out and cut it out and apply it. Yeah, so I guess I'll do that. Oh yeah, and there's a clear part for the canopy, and then that black part. I don't understand what that is really. This little. Ooh, I thought that was one piece. I couldn't figure out how that could possibly be, but it's not. That's the sprue, and those little bits on the end are the piece. And I think this is a harder plastic because I think this is designed so that the propeller rotates. Not entirely sure of that, but I think so. And this is the propeller that will eventually be painted that mahogany kind of color again, probably with maybe a brass. Well, there's a cone that goes on the front of it. Okay, I was baffled by that piece for a good long time. Haven't opened this yet. That black piece is going to go in here. This cap fits nice and tightly, and that's the tiny pieces I need to worry about later box. little pair of scissors. These are, this is a nice curved one, which allows me to just, just get a little bit of it on the thing I'm cutting. At least that's thought. Here, now I've got some trash that I'll put there, away somewhere. I'm going to leave this clear part in here. So it's fairly safe. And then, okay, that decal is, let me put these in here right away. There's two of them. I think they gave an extra because it's the kind of thing that could get lost. There's other decals here for, these, look, there's 16 of these teensy little white things. I'm not sure what those are supposed to be, but there are instructions about where to put them, as there are for these. These things are on the tail, okay? And instead of painting it green and white, there's a green and white decal that go onto a red surface. And that's supposed to create the green and white stripiness. Okay. To cut this out but not cut into it. Like this particular decal, as I'm looking at it, there's hardly any overhang at all. I was talking about that at the beginning of the stream, that a lot of decals have an overhang of the clear stuff, and that ends up not looking good. And so the decal, instead of just cutting the whole thing out like this, right? The decal itself needs to be significantly trimmed, but it doesn't look like it needs to be done on this one. Back in the box. Look at it again. Yeah, this is, as decals go, this is about as, I don't think I could get it any better than that in terms of trimming it. So this goes on there. I haven't, like I said, I haven't done decals in ages. So I know this needs to get wet and this needs to get wet. And then you put a wet, slide that onto this, and then gradually squeeze out the water. When I was a kid, we used to just drop these in the water until it just kind of came apart, which is not how it's supposed to be done. I want it to get wet enough so that it slides off easily. Okay, but not so much that it's just floating. Yeah. I used to know how long it took. That was another used to thing. Used to know how long this was supposed to take. before it started to slide off easily. These are really quite fragile, right? So that if I try to push it off before it's totally like dissolved away from the underlying paper, it could tear, and that would very much miss the point. Guess I'm just going to keep it in the water here for a bit. Should I move it over? You want to see it sitting in the water? Sure, why not? There, you can see it sitting in the water. Need this. I don't need the scissors. Those are quite a bit in the way. I don't remember it taking this long. This is it's not happening quickly. It's going to work at all. They'll probably just keep it here until all of a sudden the decal starts floating. It floats right off of the surface, right? It'll just do that, and then it'll fold in on itself and become unusable. It's just the kind of thing that would happen. While I'm doing this, wonder. No, I'm not going to just let it float in the water. I'm going to get a toothpick that doesn't have paint on it. And use one of these, not the round ones, but the flat ones. Because this one has paint on the tips. Well, I didn't expect this to be taking like this long. I didn't at all. I thought this would go like, oh, this will take 2 minutes. Then I'll have the cheater one done. There we go. Now it's sliding. Oh, geez. Okay. Yeah, now I have to position it. It's positioned, and now it's not. I should have just left it alone. Stuff is sticking to things I don't want it to stick to. Thing needs to be like a 64th of an inch this way. That's positioned, I guess that's positioned about as well as I can get it. So there, this is what the cheater instrument panel looks like. And I'm going to flip it. No, I'm going to get it out of the way here somehow. I'm going to take these pieces, try to pick this up, and just set it in here so that nothing else comes of it. Just leave it. Okay. Well, that was it just didn't work the way I thought it would. This piece of paper is no longer good. It's okay. I mean, I got it on there. It looks pretty decent. It's in a good position. It's not overhanging too much. But the thing kept sticking to my finger, and it's the only way I could move it was my finger. But I lifted it up, and it just, I don't know. It didn't stick to the thing I wanted it to stick to, which was the point of the toothpick. But it turned out okay. It was touch and go. It was literally touch and go. Okay. So I don't know if this is dry enough to do touching up on it or not. I'm going to let it set for just a little bit yet before I start doing brown. The brown, which is really desert yellow. What I can do, I was going to show off the Apollo and the submarine today, but the people who were on Friday who wanted to see it aren't. And I'm making, what is it, 11:30? No, I'm only half done. Okay. Feels like I've been at this for days today. Okay, so rather than going around and pulling out boxes and showing stuff off, I'm just going to wait on that unless some other folks pop on a little bit later, because it's only 11:30, even though it feels like 3. Whine and complain. I'm going to whine and complain to you. I am going to move this up out of the way, and I am going to start getting these pieces out. These pieces for the engine, because if nothing else today, I can get those prepped so that they're ready to go next time around. I'm just looking at the painting instructions. 2 and 8. I have a paint chart here. 2 and 8 are glossy black and chrome silver. So most of this is painted silver, but I have many different colors of silver. I don't mean different colors, different shades of all the way from bright to quite dark. And this engine has different components, many different components, like exhausts and cylinder heads and things like that. And even though it says paint them silver, or in this case, glossy black, the cylinder head's glossy black. Yeah, that'll be kind of an interesting thing to do. There's a large surface area here to be painted glossy black. Okay, that's the dark color. Well, that's nice. They colored it dark, so you know which which is supposed to be that color. Brushing that on, I don't know. What I might do is I have some glossy black spray paint, is I might spray the thing glossy black and then paint the silver parts over that. But I need to test that first, because sometimes paints, if it's a gloss paint, other paints don't adhere. And roughing up the surface so that it does adhere is not going to be easy. Yeah, but I'm not anywhere near testing that yet because I don't even have the parts out. So they're left and right parts, and they should be set up in a way so that you can't mess it up. But I'm not going to count on that. What I've done in the past, like for these pieces up here, where there is a left side and a right side, is I got a little piece of cardboard out with some two-sided tape, and I just kept the parts labeled until they were assembled. And I'm going to do that. This is shiny because I used it to test colors for the Apollo Ascent module, the part that held the astronauts, which was supposed to have been painted kind of a gunmetal metallic. And you can see one's darker than the other. I ended up using the lighter one. So these parts here, D1 through D5, 1, 2, 4, 5. I don't know where 3 and 4 went. We'll find out. They're mostly here. They're mostly this gray. I'm going to cut them off and start filing and sanding them. And then eventually they will be primed. Oh, yeah. Actually, sticking them on here with two-sided tape is a good idea anyway, because they do need to be primed, and I use a spray to prime them, and if these little parts just go flying, but if they're taped down, then they don't. Whoa. No. That isn't how it's going to go. It isn't how it's going to go at all. This is going to get assembled before it's painted, before it's primed and painted. Why? If you look at this, these parts here cement onto here, and you can see a seam right along the top. The seam is going to be right there. Okay? And on this drawing here, you can actually see the seam. See that fine line? That's where the seam is. I want that to not be showing. I want that seam to be gone before it's painted. So they need to be cemented together, and then that needs to be sanded down and then polished so that it doesn't have a seam on it. Because that's supposed to be a pipe. That's like the header pipe on the top of the engine. Yeah, so I still am going to tape these down so that I can keep track of which one goes where. Just going to use this tape because it's like a temporary thing. I need my micro saw here. I bought this. This is a real splurge. But before that, I was using an X-Acto knife to get these off of the sprue, and that didn't always work. And if they break out into the model part, then it leaves a mark there, a divot, and the divot is really hard to fill in. Whereas if I cut this off and leave some of the sprue on, I can very carefully file and sand down to the part, which is a little bit tedious. Okay. It takes more time than not doing that. But the result is that I don't have a divot in my part. Numbers are on the other side, of course. Are they? Oh, just barely visible. This is number 1. I'm taking these off. I mean, these are the next steps. So eventually this will get built. But I'm doing this now because I'm waiting for the paint to dry on the instrument panel before I start doing touch-up on the desert yellow of the wood of the instrument panel. There. 1. Might as well do this now. There's 1. There's 2. Great. That pen's working real well. Work any better? 2. Find with this masking tape is that it doesn't stick to itself. It's so weird. It sticks to other things really well, but it doesn't stick to itself very well. Okay, as I'm doing this is when I should start talking about something else, like 60 TV. Oh, what I can talk about is that if you look behind me, okay, and you do a comparison with any stream that occurred before today, you'll see that it looks different because the 3 PLA printers that were there, the 3D printers, are now on the floor inside the room. And they haven't been replaced. I can't say they've been replaced by, but they've been supplemented by 2 new 3D printers there. And the test prints, well, those things can do all sorts of things. They've got 4 spools. They got 4 spools each, and they're supposed to be able to like have different colors and switch between colors right on the fly. The setting up of the specifications for whatever is getting printed is, I don't do this. I'm just repeating what I've heard. Is supposed to be, much easier. Putting the filament in is much easier. If I don't know if anybody is familiar with sewing machines anymore, but I'm old enough that I remember my grandmother's sewing machine was a treadle. It didn't have a motor in it. There was this platform down where you put your feet, and you go like this with your feet back and forth, and that moved a belt which ran all the stuff on the sewing machine. And there were two pieces of thread. There was the spool of thread that went on, and that needed to be threaded. The tip of it runs through a couple of call them pulleys, but they're kind of like that. Some sprockets. It had to be run through some sprockets, and then threaded through the needle. And sewing machine needles get threaded on the tip, not on the end, not on the back end. So that was fascinating when I was a kid. It's, oh, look, that's really different than these other needles. I need another container. Here's one. This is also capped. I'm going to put these small parts, these little parts, D9, D8, and D10. Those little parts are going in here. This is 9, that's 8, that's 10. So it's these three things. They're going in here, and hopefully that will keep them from being lost. Okay, so there was the spool that had to be, the thread had to come off of the spool and run through some fairly small things. It was an intricate job. But then one was only half done at that point because there was this thing called a bobbin, and the thread had to be spun onto the bobbin. It was, you didn't buy bobbins, you bought empty bobbins, and then the thread you were using from the spool, there was a whole process of like an attachment on the side of the sewing machine where you could put the bobbin and the spool and then fill the bobbin with the same color thread, because the sewing machine was set up so that everything was double stitched. Okay. So every stitch had two threads in it, one from the spool and one from the bobbin. But it was an intricate process of getting these threads all in the right way so that it would work. And if one didn't get them just right, then the whole thing would just knot up, and you just get all these knots, and it would make a huge mess. So little right here, I don't know if you can see it or not. This is the little bit there from the sprue, and that'll come down. But right here, right there is a bump, and that is a flaw in the mold. Pretty sure that that's the case. Is there one on the other side? Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to check to see if that's supposed to be there. It doesn't look like it should. These little ridges, when I first saw them, I thought, well, that's a mold flaw. That's where the mold came together and it wasn't tight enough and plastic oozed out. But as I look at the picture, they're actually like little fins, and it's supposed to be there. So that is this, and this. If you're looking at the picture, these three parts are now in here. I put the cap down. And then this little bit is one of those from that black plastic. And there in the bottom is the decal version of the instrument panel, which if you catch the light just right or just wrong, you can see that it's a decal because it's shiny compared to the surface underneath it. I don't want to use that if I can get this painted one to work. Okay, those are those parts. The rest of these are red. The housing is red. I'm not sure. See, oh, this is. I'm just going to skip ahead. I'm curious about where these go. I know where the propeller goes. That goes on the very front. And okay, that's part of the propeller. That's why it's supposed to end up spinning. So that's the cone. This is a little spacer, like a spacer. That's what it is. And okay, yeah, this goes on the back of it, and then this goes over the front of it, and it's cemented on here, so it doesn't get cement on the shaft, which gets inserted into the front of the engine. So these parts, where do the manifolds come in? These things, those look like the exhaust manifolds. One would think those would go on fairly early in the process. Hmm. Oh, duh, right here. They go right here. Okay, yeah, and they get painted. They get painted 61, which is gunmetal, a darker color. Well, nothing comes off of here yet. I'm going to put these away. As long as the box doesn't get lost, they don't get lost. Saw anymore. And then sanding and filing on these parts will be coming up soon, but I'm going to get brave now and go back to this instrument panel and do the touching up with the yellow, the desert yellow paint. That's a drop some stuff on the floor. Toothpick stuck to my finger. Okay. I usually don't take a break, but before I start doing the yellow touch up, because it's just going to be one of those things that just really requires pretty good concentration. I am going to take a very quick bio break. I'll signal what I need to do there. I just need to do this so that I have a little bit steadier hand during this whole process. I will be back in like just a couple of minutes. It'll be such a short period of time that I'm not even going to put the brake light thing on. I'll just show you what is going to be happening next, and I'll be right back. All right. So hopefully that will make it a little bit more relaxed. Find out. I'm doing the Bob Ross thing again and talking in plurals. And something I had mentioned is I saw one of his episodes on, looking on PBS, and there it was. And he said, "Oh, yeah, we're going to take this yellow paint." And it's like, no, you're taking it. So I've been talking in plurals too. What I suggested when I found that out was that talking in plurals is old guys with paint. That's what happens. Going to be, yeah, probably silent again during this because it's tiny little dots of paint. And I'm trying to keep it flat. I'm trying to keep it so that it is not building up and creating a lumpy surface. I don't want a lumpy surface. I want a smooth surface. See how this all works. Start with some from the bottle cap here until it becomes unusable. So the problem is seeing, it's the same color against the same color. So just seeing where the tip of the brush is becomes the biggest challenge. So as advertised, I am being pretty silent here because it is just walking and chewing gum isn't the thing I can do. Get a little bit chilled and a little bit tense. My shoulders tense up, and then my hand starts vibrating a little bit. Hand needs to be pretty steady here. He's gummed up on it. No, really having. Some spots. Man, I don't know if I can get there from here. The part of this is paint. It's kind of glossy as it goes on until it dries. So sometimes it's hard to tell if there's still metallic there that needs to be covered up, whether it's just wet paint. This needs to dry, and then I need to somehow get the wash on it and darken it all to make it look like mahogany. I could just paint it a darker brown, but that wouldn't have the same effect. It would just look like flat dark brown. I'd say so far that looks pretty good. Okay. This is acceptable. It will look a lot better when it's washed. And I'm hoping that that process works okay. Trying to get the cap on here. There's nothing more I can do on that until that paint dries. So I'm going to wait at least half an hour because I don't want the next step to just ruin it. What I can do then is I'm going to show to you, not show you. I'm not showing you. I'm showing to you the thing I'm doing on the Apollo. So if you look at old streams, me working on the Apollo, you know that the command module is the thing that's left. Okay. And the command module, the inside of it is painted this green, this bluish color, light blue. All right. And if you look carefully, you can see that there is a very, very light embossing, just really shallow of the instruments that are supposed to be on the instrument panel. Well, what comes of this then is that I either try to somehow paint those, and maybe I could use the technique of rubbing the paint off of some of these. I'm not sure. Or I just put it in like this and the whole thing just looks kind of, blah. Oh yeah, well, that's a cheater instrument panel. So what I am hoping to do, okay, is I found these pictures of the instrument panel. The pictures are actually much larger, and I have no idea what's going on. You can't hear it. You can't hear it because the microphone filters out the sounds, but there's stuff going on upstairs that's really very loud. These are the parts of the instrument panel. This is the part that I've got here. Okay, this one goes up in between, and then there's parts on either side that also have instrument panels on them. These are kind of shrunk down to roughly the, not exactly, but pretty close to the size of this. All right. Our color printer isn't really working very well. So this is what it looks like in gray. And I tried to make it blue. We want it to kind of match this color. This isn't working either, but you get the idea. So I cut one out. This was printed in, standard print clarity, just to test it. So instead of this, these will get printed like this in high definition, okay, on sticky paper. Then I'm going to make stickers, right? And then the stickers will go on the instrument panel like that, so that when it's assembled, it will look, it'll look better than this because we'll get the color right. Like the pink is supposed to be orange, the blue is supposed to be green. I'll just let you know, what has happened is that the yellow, the cyan, okay, and the magenta are working just fine, but the yellow isn't working at all. So there's no yellow ink coming. So that would be orange, and this would be green, and if there were yellow, and then this would be a different shade of blue. This is the shade of blue that I want, because that's pretty close. But you can see that instead of just having this light embossing, which would be impossible to paint and doesn't really match the instrument panel anyway, okay, it doesn't represent what the instrument panel really is. This is just grayscale with no color at all, just to see. I just wanted to see if it would work. And the answer is yes. If it was shaped and cut to size, then this would go on here. And when one looked in the tiny little hatchway, the tiny little hatchway in the command module, you would be able to see the facsimile of the instrument panel. That's why the Apollo is taking forever, because it's waiting for this to be done. I've got the pictures, I've got the sticky paper, but the printer isn't working. And so it's just going to have to wait until the printer is working. And then I'll probably use some sort of better Photoshop software or something to actually print the things. So yeah, that's the kind of fancy thing I'm trying to do with the Apollo to make it look better than just the model. I need to keep this in a safe place. Here's a safe place. This box of things. I'll just keep it in here, so don't lose it. All right, so the instrument panel is coming out okay. I think it looks all right, but it needs the smoky ink wash, so it looks like a mahogany panel and not a bland panel like it does here. And then I'll have an instrument panel that will be okay. It will be it will be as good as I can get it, and it will look better than the decal. All right, I still have a bunch of time left. These parts need to be prepared, so I am going to do that. Get what I'll need is needle file, some needle files, and sandpaper. And the sandpaper is okay here, enough of it anyway. And so, for example, on this part, let's start with one. Start with one. The main thing that needs to be done is that the bits of sprue that are still on there need to be filed down and sanded. Okay, they need to be filed down so that they disappear. And sanded, I'll file them down close to, but not on, because the file leaves scratch marks. And I don't want, even though this is on the bottom, okay, I really don't want the scratch marks to show. So I'm going to use the file, which cuts the plastic fairly quickly, to get it down close to the surface. And then I'm going to use sandpaper of like 600 or 800 grit to get the rest of it down. And then I'm going to polish it with a 1500 grit emery. When I was taking these off the tree, or before that, I was saying that about 50% of the time that goes into a model like this is turning out to be doing this, prepping the pieces so that they fit and they look good. In doing this kind of thing, I have become much more impressed with the people who are master modelers. I mean, who are just insanely good, amazingly good at getting these things done. There's seams never show. All their demarcation lines between the different colors of paint are perfect. It was like, well, it's just a plastic model. I used to build these things. I'd build a World War, a Cold War bomber in 2 days. And the only reason it took that long was it said, well, cement the two halves of the fuselage together and then let it put rubber bands around it and let it wait a day. Otherwise, I'd just slap it together in 1 day and put the decals on it. It'd be done, right? So what's the deal? Well, the deal is that if one really pays attention to the model, you find that the parts really don't fit. There's seams that show. Sprue like this, you break it off, and now there's a divot in the model itself. So, what I've discovered is that it's not just putting together a plastic model. With the amount of time and effort it takes, sometimes it's almost as though you might as well have fabricated the parts yourself. And I know that in really serious master modeling, it's very, very serious stuff. There's a whole aftermarket of parts that are more historically accurate than the ones that come with the kits. And that some people just do, in fact, fabricate their own parts, because the ones that come with the kits just aren't they're not up to the standard of the model they're trying to make. So when you see somebody displaying a plastic model and it looks amazing, you should just know that they did a whole lot more than just build a plastic model in order to make it look that way. Going through my little bits here. There, 600. This is my sanding block. Oh yeah, I should really try to keep this on camera. Make an effort to do that. So as I'm building the engine of the Porco Rosso, okay, and it ends up taking like 3 hours, I'm not kidding, to just get parts right, to get the sprue marks off so that there's no lumps and they don't show, to cement it together and then get rid of the seams so that the seams don't show. Okay. It's just, that's what it takes to keep it from looking not very good. I mean, it would look like it would if I built it when I was in 7th or 8th grade. And I want it to look like more like I know what I'm doing. I'm nowhere near the quality of a master modeler, though. Just even if I absolutely knew what I was doing, I can't. Like with the instrument panel, that was just a level of detail that a person who was really good at it would not be satisfied with. Running his finger over it. I find that the finger and fingernail are more sensitive to little variations in it than looking at it. Yeah, and there's always just a little bit of it looks as done, but then this last bit won't come off. I think this won't show at all. Oh yeah, it will. It's right at the top. Oh, seriously? I'm going to be a little bit annoyed here. Yeah, it is the case that the sprue was attached to the top of it, the part that shows right at the very top, which is, if this was at the bottom, you'd never see it, but it's at the very top. So you can see it. The only thing that I can say about this is that because it's at the top, when these other parts get put on it, and then I try to get rid of the seam, I'm going to have to be sanding this down anyway. And so these flaws will disappear at that stage. I don't have to be 100% perfect at this point, because that'll be taken care of later. But sometimes I'm just really surprised that these things are really designed well. This model is better than most of the ones that I built, certainly better than the submarine and even the Apollo. But then it's, why did you attach the sprue at the most visible part of the model? You know that there's going to be an issue there. where the sprue has to come off. Something's gonna be a problem. Something has to be sanded down or filed or both. Why put it where you can see it the most? I don't know. Okay, this bit here, this is another bad attachment point, is right on the side here where just above and below it is more detail that isn't supposed to be sanded. Careful about where I am sanding so I don't mar some surfaces that we don't want marred. I'm correct. These parts here, the seam will extend all the way down here like that. This is a V6. Seams go all the way around the engine, and it's painted gloss, either black gloss or metallic. So any flaws, scratch marks, seams, all of that will show. These parts, the engine is going to take a while. It just is. Okay, well, that's mostly gone, but as I said, it doesn't have to be perfect at this point because there's going to just be more sanding done to get rid of the seams once the cement sets. So the same part on the other side, the same shape of part. It's not the same part. If it were the same part, it would be that part. But it's the other side version of that first part. You keep discovering that if one takes literally what is said, it just starts sounding silly. This is the same part. No, it's not the same part. It can't be the same part. Filing it off first and then sanding it with the 600 grit, which is about as coarse as I get. I don't use less than a 600 for most of this. It's slower than if I were to use like a 400 or a 300, but it leaves less scratches, and that means less polishing. If I were to use like a 300 grit, this would go faster, but then I'd have to use an 800 grit to get rid of those scratch marks, and then a 1500 to get rid of those scratch marks. So if I use this, then I only need to use the 1500 to polish it after this is put together and I get the rub the seams out. Keeping it on camera, it's not very interesting. Watching me sand sprue bits off of the pieces, but it has to be done. Otherwise, it doesn't look good. It's finished. There was a lot of this on the submarine. and a fair amount of it on the Apollo. The Apollo parts were larger. There was some detailed bits, but not like the submarine. And this has bits that are even more detailed than some of the submarine parts were. And by detail, what I really mean is tiny. Inside the cockpit, these bits, okay, and these bits here, those were really tiny. And I almost lost one trying to get it in place using tweezers, and it's popped out of the tree. Tweezers popped out and went flying and actually landed on the floor. It was a miracle that I found it. Seriously, it was like black on black. And I was just running my hand across the rubber mat that's on the floor and managed to find it that way. Finish this one. Then I really need to I really would like to finish that instrument panel. So even though it's late in the stream, and usually that is when I am most prone to have a problem, I'm going to be gone for a week, not be streaming on Wednesday or Friday this week or next week, Monday. I'd like to have that done so that when I get back on the 18th will be the next time I stream. I can assemble the cage, this bit. You can't see it. I can assemble this bit into that. Okay. And then really close to being done with the interior of the Savoia. Work in earnest on this bit, the engine and the rest of the plane. These parts aren't going to fit. They're not going to fit very well at all. I can see that. They're going to need additional sanding and shaping before I can even cement these parts together. It's not a bad thing, but they're just, they're tiny. And I have to be careful with them so that I don't mess them up. But these, trying to figure out how these are supposed to look. What are they? They're not. There's 6 on each side. That maybe they're valves. Yeah, I think they might be. The engine is like built upside down with the valves on the bottom. That's not unusual for airplane engines. I think these are like valve covers. Really tempted to try to do some test fitting, but get this done. I can usually tell, the sprue material left. If you look at it, you can maybe see the tiny little white spots. Um, where it's raised above the rest of the surface. It's not. It's just a different color, especially if it's not uniform. Like if it looks like there's a semicircle or something like that. That's usually a sign that it is not flush. Then I can feel it with my fingernail. It catches there, so it's not a smooth surface. It's holding it on the edge. It's kind of sharp. Didn't cut, but it poked. Something to become impatient at this point and file too far. And then start dropping pieces. I'm starting to become reluctant about doing the wash this late in the stream. Yeah. See, what I'm finding is that, I start dropping things. I start losing focus a little bit. And putting that wash on is a very delicate thing. So I think I lied. I mean, I would really like to have gotten it done today, but I don't. I'm just not going to take the chance. I could mess that whole instrument panel up by having the brush just bump in the wrong spot, um, or spilling something, or not having a uniform color. The wash is a little bit hard to use because it, if it gets too thick in one place and too thin in another, then the color is all off. So I'm just not. It's not going to finish it. Just it's not worth the chance in terms of the time I would save. I can work on these other parts. Sanding and filing like this, isn't quite as delicate as that because it can always be redone. I'm going to take this. You can see that it came out pretty well, but this whole thing needs to be darker, which means getting a wash on all of the brown and not anything else. And I'm not capable of doing that today. So I'm not going to. I'm going to put this away. Set this here underneath the paper towel, along with the other parts. And it's going to have to wait till I get back on the 18th. But I do have enough time, I think, to finish the prep on these little bits. And I'm going to actually move closer and work further up. The issue here is dropping the parts and losing them. All right. So this part, well, we can't see it, but it goes like this. It goes this way on the front of the engine. And there are mold marks, just a thin line that I can see by rotating it in the light that runs right along the long axis. And those need to be sanded off because otherwise they will show and not look good at all. And I want to use the polishing kind of paper that I've got. Not the 800 or the 600, but like the 1500, or maybe this. You don't want scratch marks, but this is really teeny. And, and as I'm doing this, I can see that not only is there a little bit of a seam, where the two halves of the mold, where the plastic just came through a little bit, but that the two halves weren't perfectly aligned. Because as I'm sanding this, one side is sanding before the other, which means it's higher. And then I want to keep at this until the gloss is the same all the way across. Period. Needs the same treatment. In the center also, but I'll do that after I get the ends done. It isn't much, but when it's painted a gloss, it's going to show. And then it'll look like, instead of a solid piece of metal, for example, it'll look like a piece of plastic that was molded in two parts. If I want to be really compulsive about this, I would put my head magnifiers on and get it that way to see if I was getting it, as opposed to just looking at the reflectivity of the piece. Middle is the issue in the middle is really obvious. I have to do it this way. So I have to get into the corner, right in the corner there. Yeah, I can see the little shininess. There's a little shininess there that needs to disappear, especially it's taking a while. The two halves are just misaligned just enough, making quite a lot of abrasion to get them where they should be. And it's one of those things again. Spending what like 5-8 minutes or something sanding down this little bit of plastic that has mold seams on it. And you go, well, why bother? Well, the why bother is that it's right on the top of the model and they'll show. And then it'll, especially since it's painted a silver color, it'll show pretty badly. And the part it's supposed to represent is just a solid piece of metal. It's not supposed to have a seam on the middle. So that's why I'm doing this. It's a really fine sandpaper. Whoa, almost lost it. So that I don't replace the seam with just a bunch of scratch marks. Yeah, and it's not something that shows up on camera really well because it's so small. And I suppose I could have like a micro camera that zooms in or something like that, but I don't, and I'm not going to. So you'll just have to take my word for it that that's what I did, and that it looks better now. There are also seam marks along the bottom. These will be invisible because it'll be on the bottom and covered in a cowling, but I'm going to just get rid of them as well. This could have been worse. I've had parts that were misaligned by maybe 10% of the entire width of the part. And so sanding out those things, you end up, 10% on either side, the whole thing becomes 20% thinner to get the sides even. That can be a problem. Okay, well, then there's the thing I was starting with, which is the little sprue bit down at the bottom here. Yeah, it's a good thing that I'm not trying to finish the instrument panel because I just had the file slip and I almost gouged a piece off of this that shouldn't be touched at all. So I showed good judgment. Yay for me. I showed good judgment and didn't attempt to do something that had a high probability of being messed up. That's a very technical term for messing it up. Okay, that's the second time that popped up, and the second time I caught it. All right. Well, as I'm getting near the end here, I want to make a plug for Dice and Dungeons, because Dice and Dungeons is first and foremost a Dungeons and Dragons show, and that streams with a live chat. See, the last 45 minutes of the stream is always entertaining because who knows what kind of words I will fail to say. Yeah, it streams with a live chat on the Sundays, 3 Sundays a month, but you can also catch it on YouTube and as a podcast. And I want to encourage everybody, and everybody knows, and everybody who's an acquaintance of those everybody's, to catch our show because it is amazing. Our DM has created a tremendous homebrew world. Our characters are entertaining. The encounters are fascinating. There's huge backstories to everything that we keep discovering. So it's very complex and compelling. And I think everybody should watch it. This stream is a spin-off of that because our show features dungeon tiles that are printed on our 3D printers here and hand painted. And I'm not going to show them to you because I want to try to get this done. But the stream started painting the minifigs and dungeon tiles for the show. And when we didn't have any, I started working on models, of which I have finished one, almost finished another, and am working on a third. That's not counting the fourth one that I don't talk about, which is the Think Eliminator, Big Daddy Roth Think model. And somehow or other, nobody liked. So although I got repros of almost all of them, I haven't worked on them. They're not as popular as Porco Rosso here. It's just a little spot there that just the last bits there's always a last bit that refuses to it just refuses. I'll just say that it is refusing. It's refusing. To do this, but I'm going to. That back in this little container. I'm going to lose that. What's this? Some of these parts have parts that aren't really parts. Okay. Like this circular thing at the end that looks like it's part of it, but it's not. I'm pretty sure it's not. And this is really hard to tell. Screw on here. It's really kind of hard to tell what's supposed to be here and what isn't because of the way it was attached to the sprue. But this is so ragged that it looks like it's like it should be filed off and down. Okay, well, I guess this is supposed to not be here. If it is supposed to be here. This part is a little bit puzzling. all sorts of little protuberances and stuff. Pretty sure this is not one of them, though. This part is going to wait. I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and then at some point there's just going to be an arbitrary decision about where the plastic should be and where it isn't, and I'm not going to make that decision today. I can't see it well enough. I need to use my head magnifiers and also get a better idea of how this part fits into the rest of the model. Take a bit. So that's going to be unfinished. This, I know these things come off. That lump, sometimes when it pulls away from the mold, some of these smooth parts, a little bit of plastic is left hanging. And that's what's happening there. Tiny little pieces that are very hard to hold on to. Yeah, they're just hard to hold on to. Cleaning and polishing. So I'm going to finish this. I'm not going to finish that other one because, as I said, I couldn't tell what's supposed to be there and what isn't. And I need to use my head magnifier and really get close up on it. And that's not something I can do right near the end of the stream. Just not, don't stay focused well enough for it. Let me just clean this up a little bit more so that I can't feel that with my nail. Sometimes this looks like it's more worn out, but it's the abrasive on it is more effective. So yeah, Dice and Dungeons is about Dungeons and Dragons in this show. This stream started out and up until today, for the last 2 weeks, continued to be about painting minifigs and dungeon tiles for the show. And these models are just kind of like a filler between that. And I'm filling it with this Porco Rosso model. This isn't the tiniest part, but it's a pretty visible part. It's going to be painted metallic, and so flaws like the sprue mark, unless they're polished out, are going to show pretty significantly. You'll be able to see them, and I don't want that to be on the model. I'll probably go over all of these again before they're assembled, because sometimes I see that I think I got it right, and then I test fit things and I see a problem. So you might see me sanding on these yet again in the future. I'm going to be away Wednesday and Friday this week, and Monday next week. I'll be back on the 18th. And at that time, I will, in fact, finish the instrument panel that I was painting earlier today by putting the smoky ink wash on the wooden parts to make it look like a great mahogany, like a polished mahogany kind of instrument panel. And then once that dries, I will assemble the parts of the cage for the cockpit. And then I will test fit to see if Porco Rosso's seated model will fit through the top of that so I can move on. I can add it to the fuselage and move on, or whether I need to do the Porco Rosso seated model first so that that can be installed before this is put on. In the meantime, I am prepping pieces for the engine, which is what you can see me doing here now. That close the cover. I'm going to bundle this stuff up and kind of move it aside because it's likely that while I am not streaming for the next week, some other people will be using this workbench because that's all it is a workbench. They'll be doing bench work on the workbench. And I don't want there to be a problem with the Porco Rosso model. And so I'm going to smaller piece of cardboard. Getting a small. Oh, what was that? That is a bent paper clip. I'm getting a little piece of cardboard so that I can stick those parts on it and get them into the box. This is gold, all shiny gold, because testing the gold paint for the descent component, the descent module of the LEM on the Apollo model. Yeah, at this point, I can't even move tape. Definitely was a wise decision to not attempt to finish the instrument pan. Okay, these guys go away. I'm going to move this box this direction so that I can carefully arrange parts inside of it. Okay. This is part of the Apollo. So these guys are going to go here. This is the instrument panel on here. These are the parts that wrap around the whole thing that goes over the cockpit. These are the parts for the engine, and those are parts for later. The Apollo, I'm just going to make this small enough to fit in the box. I want it to lay flat. There. That's how you fit things. There. That's going to go there. So I've got trash to clean up here, but be that as it may, at least I will be able to set stuff aside in a safe place. Hopefully, it'll all be intact when I get back on the 18th. Okay, there. Set those up there. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate anybody who was watching the stream either now while it was happening or on YouTube later. I will be back on the 18th, and I'll be working on the Porco Rosso model. And if we ever get the yellow working on our printer, also the finishing up the command module of the Apollo one of these years. If you don't know what I mean by that, you'll have to check out some of the earlier parts of this particular stream to see what I'm doing in terms of trying to replicate the look of the Apollo command module instrument panels. This is coming along, but it's coming along really slowly. Sometimes I've been working on things out of order, or like with the instrument panel, I've just avoided it until it was, time to get it done. But I'm going to put this someplace where it will be probably safe for the next week. Probably. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to be signing off, and see you a week from Wednesday. Bye.